Okay, this whatever this is going to be is unpracticed, so I will be probably rambling a bunch. But the purpose of it, I guess, is to share my experience from like going from student to level designer, and like in the industry and stuff. Because I feel like I sort of had this process that in hindsight, I think would be helpful if I like knew more about that. So hopefully I can not only share to you like what level design is, why I think it's really cool, but also like some tips and stuff for like how you can get better at it and get into it and everything. Maybe just really quick show of hands. Who here in our little room is like, who's interested in getting into the game industry? Like, is that something that people want to do or like are thinking of doing? Cool. So like most people, it could be cool if it's an option. I guess it's hard for me to see the chat at the same time, but I don't know, we can do questions after. That's a benefit of being here in person, is I can see your hands. So cool. So I guess like the point of this is maybe to show people that it is competitive, but it is not like impossible. It's not as hard as people think, and some tips that I think would help you if you're interested in that. So without further ado, level design, what is it? Why would anyone want to do it? Do you want to do it? What do you got to do it? Let's find out. Does anyone get that reference? Cool. It's from the TV show BoJack Horseman, if anyone gets it. But anyway, we'll get it next time maybe. Cool. So who am I? First of all, my name's Quinn. I graduated from the CET program at SFU, which is the Surrey one. Maybe some folks that are coming in from Surrey are part of that program. I don't know. But yeah, I think the program's pretty cool, mixed bag, but overall turned out well. I have an artistic background. So before I got into game design, I was going to hopefully get into like concept art and stuff. So this is like some of the digital paintings that I've done. This is just to give you a sense of like what my skill set was like before I got into games and how I was able to translate some of those skills. Because I don't have like all of the ones that are the most important, but this was one of them that I think was important. Another fun fact, I used to play League of Legends semi-professionally. I played for the SFU team, and this is me at Riot Games playing on stage, which is a really cool experience. So I've played a lot of video games, is what the point of the slide is. I also play a lot of Dungeons and Dragons, which I'll assume most people know what that is. But again, like I'll get into like why this is like somewhat important. I think like these different things that I've done have helped in my like level design journey and like learning how to do it. Why should you care about what I have to say? So I think that I was like in your position once, like I was at SFU, didn't know what I wanted to do. I was like, maybe I'll do animation, maybe I'll do concept art, whatever. Like I didn't know. And then over the course of my time there, I like found some really cool people, did some really cool projects. One of those projects, which is the one in the middle, was one of the CET courses that was the project that got me a job in games. Like the stars aligned for the group. I just met some really talented people and we made something really cool. Showcased it, which was something the professor did where like he put it on display for people to come and see. And there happened to be people hiring who came and watched. They were like, this is the coolest project here. So here's our card, right? So I got really lucky. But again, like I kind of just stumbled into that a little bit from just like a cool project. My experience at Metanaut, which was the first position I got where Anya worked as well with me, I was able to take that experience, learn a bunch, get that like frickin' 3 years that everyone says you need to apply to any stupid job. So once I had that, I was like, okay, now I can like do something. And I used that experience to springboard me into a mid-level position at Archiact, which is where I currently am now. I've been there for about like 2 months, so not very long at all. But yeah, I'm no longer a junior, which is really cool to say. I'm like, my position is just level designer, which is rad. But yeah, I've done this kind of process, so I'm gonna try to share some things about that can maybe help you if you want to get into it. So first of all, what is level design? So to put it really simply, level design is the organization and construction of a game's space to best support its gameplay. So I think like when people think of level design, some people think of like, Mario Maker or something where it's kind of this very specific situation. But it's like a much broader subject. And it varies really, really heavily depending on what project you're on. But at the highest level, it's just you trying to understand like what the gameplay, the mechanics, the most important part of your game is, and then constructing a space to take advantage of that as best as possible. And that's like really what it is. Like that's your job, is that's how you make the game fun, is you create this area where you can do all the cool stuff in, and that area you should be able to do as much as you can with that cool stuff. But going into some more specifics, here are some examples of like gameplay. The Last of Us, like a stealth third-person shooter, a Super Smash Bros, a like very mechanically intensive fighting game. Spider-Man for PlayStation, a lot of like really fast far traversal with web slinging and like punchy kick for the other parts, and like Mario, a 2D side-scrolling platformer. So this is like the gameplay elements. All of these games have like the gameplay that the designers thought would be like super fun and important. So yeah, you gotta get the gist of like what you're able to do. And the space, what's constructed to support that gameplay. So like with The Last of Us, like I don't know what came first, but like the idea of like an overgrown dystopian city, like that space, that theme, like allows the designers to create interesting gameplay with what they want to do, which is like stealth. Like you can put bushes and leaves and cars and broken things, and all of those things can be arranged in a way that makes stealth like feel real and feel good. Smash Bros, like there's nothing there. It's just a freaking plane and two sides, right? Because all that matters in Smash is the like high mechanically intensive stuff. So like this is, although it's like simple as hell, like this is a good space for Smash Bros. Like you can do all the things you want to do. Spider-Man, New York City. Spider-Man's all about like web slinging, like huge verticality. So I mean, that's kind of I guess a cop out because that was already like there, like from the movies and stuff. But you know, the space supports the gameplay by making these like really tall buildings because that's what makes sense to sling around. And then Mario, like again, like a simpler version, like it looks simple, but like each of those blocks, those platforms, like they were placed at that spot for a reason, whether it be like 4 squares high is a good jump height for Mario. A designer figured that out. And they're like, there's no jump heights that are less than that or more than that, because that's like the comfortable jump height. So like they're trying to figure out what distances and how the space can be arranged to best support jumping and bashing your head against stuff, right? Although this talk, I'm trying to cover level design as a concept, it will be somewhat focused on like AAA, like 3D level design, but it can be, transferred to any game. I think the basic principles. But generally in the industry, what level designers are actually creating are what are called blockouts. And this changes over the course of a project, like once you get more details and everything. But what a blockout is it's the impression of a space. And the reason it's the impression of a space is because they want to create something for as little effort as possible. Like if you're on a team, or big or small, and eventually you want to make your space like look awesome, but like making art takes like a freaking million years, right? Like making good looking art takes a long ass time. So making a blockout is just like using very, very simple geometry, simple primitive shapes, cubes and cones, whatever, to create the impression of what that space will eventually be. And again, the reason it needs to be quick is because you're iterating. Like you're putting something out first, what you think will be good. You're testing it. You're like throwing some gameplay in. You're seeing how it works, and then you're changing it. You're deleting stuff. You're figuring out what will work best for your game. So you don't want to like spend a whole bunch of work making a bunch of like pretty trees and buildings and stuff when eventually you're going to change the shape of them anyways. But blockouts are what they're called. So there's this thing called Blocktober. If you go like hashtag Blocktober or something, it's this like kind of like Inktober, but level design version. People on Twitter like throw in all kinds of blockouts to look at. Sometimes they're also referred to as white boxing or gray boxing or orange boxing. Again, it depends on the studio. Like game design is interesting because studios, it varies so heavily from studio to studio, like what they call things. But yeah, blockouts, that's what they are. It's an important concept for level design. Question about like where does a level design role fall on like all the spectrum positions in game dev? I think this is interesting, and this is like a little bit pertaining to like me, and I think anyone where like maybe you like are really good at programming and engineering, and like you don't have as much artistic abilities, or maybe you've done a lot of art and you've done a lot of programming, which is like me. Like I think scripting is like my weakest point for sure. Like I'm just learning like blueprints right now in Unreal and stuff. But level design is interesting because it falls in this like great like middle ground where if you have like a lot of scripting experience, you just have to learn like a little bit of visual design, and you can get to a point where level design is definitely possible. And same on the other end, if like you have a heavy art experience, a lot of sort of like 2D design work, you just have to learn a little bit of scripting, and you can like get to a point where you're able to make some interesting things. It's kind of a range here because it depends on the studio where like how which way it leans, like how much creativity do you have when you're creating a level, and how much do you have to sort of just keep your head down and focus on like the gameplay and stuff. And I'll get into that in this next little bit. But yeah, different games have like vastly different kind of spatial requirements for the levels depending on what you're creating it for. So some examples, Celeste is a 2D platformer. Maddie Thorson has a bunch of great talks on like YouTube and stuff where you can like look at how it was made. But like if you look on the left, that would be the block out for Celeste, right? Like very simple, like there's not much creativity. You don't see like them trying to like, you know, show that it's made of ice or rock or whatever. It's just all that matters for this block out is like, what are the jump distance? How do I create an interesting challenge? And like what needs to be tweaked to make this level as fun as possible, right? So like they don't care about any of the details until they've figured out what feels good. On the other side of things, in The Last of Us, like on the left is a block out. This is like what a level designer created. And then on the right is the final version where the artists and the whole team came in and made it look, you know, freaking amazing. But on the left, like that's a pretty good amount of creativity that the level designer had. Like they get to arrange grass and like fences and trees and like, I'm not sure if they like sort of made those actual buildings from their own reference or from art reference or whatever, but from what I've seen from Naughty Dog, it's likely that the level designer was able to like do their own research and find like buildings that made sense and like built them, right? So they have like, that's much more on the art side. That's like smack dab in the middle where they get to like actually come up with the space themselves a bit. Whereas a game like Valorant, Riot, like all that matters with Valorant is like balance, right? Like when they're blocking out like the Valorant multiplayer maps, like all that matters is like, okay, like is there an unfair headshot angle here, or like is it too attacker sided based on like the like space between this hallway or whatever? Like all those little details, they're like fine tuning the shit out of those like constantly. So like the team does not want level designers to like get creative, like try to put like a big tree in here or whatever, right? All that matters is these blocks, and then later on an artist will figure out like what those blocks will look like. So again, it depends on the studio, but bottom line is that it's this interesting kind of division between design, like design focused, and art, where you can get a little bit creative. Another thing what level designers are trying to do is prove whether an idea will be successful. So I hear this word tossed around at my job like constantly with my level design leads and stuff, which is intention. That's like so many times I say it, like every meeting we have is like, I understand your intention here, right? And that's because when you're making a level design, at least for big companies or even small ones, usually you're like, okay, for this level, like it's this like third part of the game where like you're on this, you're in this like mission area where like you need to have a little bit of stealth, and it's like in a city, whatever. Like you kind of understand what the setting might be. So you're coming up with like, oh, like maybe it'll be cool if there's this part where you're like swimming through the sewers or whatever. Like I'm just spitballing here, but if that's your idea, if that's like the kind of details that you think will make your level interesting, you need to show that to your team. You need to show that to the people who are going to actually build it, and you just prove to them that your idea is good in as little effort as possible. So you're like making, again, like just primitive shapes to represent pipes, and like just a simple plane to represent water. Again, you don't want to put a lot of effort in, but the little details that you can do to show somebody that your idea is cool and worth doing is what your job is. So for example, this is a prototype blockout from Jedi Fallen Order during development. And if you look at like the character model, like that's not a Jedi, that's just some stupid army guy they found and plopped in, right? Like doesn't really have like proper animation, and he's crawling on orange squares on a big white thing, right? Like it doesn't look good. But what the level designer was trying to do here, I'm assuming, was prove to the team that like, oh, there would be this cool moment where you're climbing on a big AT-AT walker and it's going to be sick, right? Like it's going to be this cool climbing scene where you get to like crawl along this, maybe like go in through its head and like kill the Empire or whatever. So they threw in this like placeholder army guy. They probably like found like some, I don't know, simple model and put it in. And then they like created this like really quick climbing script to show that you can kind of do this. And then the team looks at that and is like, oh, like that's super cool. Like that makes sense. I see what you're trying to communicate to me. Let's spend the time to build it and make it work, because I can see that it'll work because from this kind of blockout from this prototype. So that's another thing. A big part of level design is like proving and communicating your ideas and your intention. Why is level design cool? This is like what I think. This is like me trying to convince you that this is a cool thing. Level design is like the structure that the game is built upon. What I mean is that like it doesn't matter how like pretty your art is. It doesn't matter how beautiful your sound design, how compelling your narrative is, if you have gameplay, by which I mean like mechanics where you need to use them to overcome problems. If the level design is weak and like the pacing is off, like you're doing combat for an hour straight and it gets fatiguing, or if you're like talking for too long, if the level design isn't good, everything will just crumble. Like you need to have that level design as this footprint to build everything on top of, because if you know the level design is good, you know the game will be fun, because it's about fun really at the end of the day. So I just think that's really cool, is that as a level designer, you have that much control and agency over the player experience. Like you yourself are tailoring it, right? Which is like a bit of pressure, but don't worry about that. Just like if you iterate and do it, like it's a cool feeling. It feels good to be able to have that control over stuff. So yeah, I think level design is really, really fun for that reason. What are the skills that makes a good level designer? The first thing is understanding space. So space is like this huge, like ethereal subject that like so many like sort of hipster courses I took at CIAT were talking about, where it's like, ooh, like the colors and the lighting and everything will like create different emotions for the person. And like, it sounds very heady, but there is something to it. Like if you study that, you can use that as like a tool to create these like compelling and interesting levels and spaces. So it's really about like, how can the physical layout in a game affect how the player interprets it? Because you can get so much ground just from like how a space is physically laid out. I'm going to do a quick little exercise. I stole this from a Twitter thread from this person named Tommy Norberg, who's a level designer that worked on like Just Cause and a bunch of other stuff. I don't know if we can link this presentation to people after, but that'd be great if you want to like look at yourself. But a little exercise for you guys, if we have some like participation. This is a space. Let's pretend this little white person at the bottom is the player. Just like for anybody, like what do you think this space is like trying to communicate to the player? Like what do you think the game is wanting you to do when you look at this space?
So it looks like there is kind of a direction, a very like interesting point right in the middle.
Yeah.
This sewer entrance, it appears like.
Yeah. Yeah.
Just go in the hole.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, I don't think you need to overthink it. And that's exactly it. It's like the space is designed around like the idea of like this particular one is forward motion. And you can see that like, yeah, there's a front and center hole that leads somewhere. Like you can see that plainly. There's like a ramp leading up to it. The like objects are like open, there's no hidden areas. Like you're able to see that like there's one way to go, and everything is kind of bordering that. So yeah, that the space is designed and thrown in a way to you know, get people to think that. And like that's done with the space and nothing else. Like you don't need a tutorial or an objective marker to say like go forward, because you enter this area and you know that's probably what you wanted to do, right? So that's what I mean by it can do a lot of work for you. Here's another one. What do you think this one is trying to inform the player?
Okay, I'll take this.
Sure.
It's similar to the last one, but there's a bend now, and it kind of makes you think, you know, should I go this way? It's kind of feels almost like a question.
Sure. Yeah.
Over to the right side, there's kind of like a little area where you could, like a nook you could hide in.
Mhm.
I don't know. To me, that suggests something not very nice is going to come out of that tunnel, and maybe that's a place to like shoot at it. Or
Cool.
something like that.
Totally. Yeah, I think both are correct. Like it makes you kind of stop for a moment and like think more about what you're going to do. And you're totally right on the side to the right. Like that does look like a place to hide from what's on the left. And the fact that you can't see what's in the tunnel is like a huge part of it. Like it's a mystery, right? What's in there? Like I can't see it now, so I'm going to be more careful. And that's exactly what it is. It's a sense of caution. Like this space, like same exact elements just shifted around, and it creates this completely new emotion, right? Because again, like you picture yourself going down there, it's like, oh, like there's a hiding spot. Maybe I will have to use that. I can't see what's in the hole. Like, what if it's something dangerous? Totally. So these like learning about space and what it can do, like lets you just craft these feelings that can support what you want your game to do. Again, like if you, or whether you're a, you know, parkour Mirror's Edge, which the first one might be good, or a Last of Us type thing where you're hiding and not sure. One more. What do we think of this one?
Looks like it's trying to get you to explore or like maybe climb up.
Cool. Yeah, I think I'll just run with that. Discoverability, you nailed it on the head, the first one, but there's no exits here. There's no sewer exits here. So when you see this from above, you're like, okay, this is something I'll probably have to backtrack from, right? Like I'll go in explore and then come back out. But then you're like, okay, why did the game put this here? Is there something to find? Exactly. So you go, you look in all the nooks and crannies, and you want to create this sense of like, there's something hidden here. I want to find it. Again, just using the same thing. So space is like super powerful. Understanding space, I think, is really important. And whether it be like in architecture classes or just from looking at games and studies, that's definitely important. Another skill is communicating ideas. So kind of what I talked about before, which is like level designers are trying to create the impression to show people like why their levels are going to be cool and worth making. So I'll go over a little bit more specifics and like what are the actual soft skills that can like help you do that. The big one again right away is the blockout. Being able to, you don't need to 3D model, but 3D modeling helps a little bit. But essentially just like placing primitives to build the impression of space, getting used to working with scale. Like you want to make a door in a space, that door should be accurately sized. You don't want to feel like a little small person like going through a door if it's like a realistically scaled game, that kind of stuff. So getting used to being able to like block out, which is like pretty simple to learn. Like any game engine, you can go in and start placing cubes, and you're doing it. That's all it is, right? So that's the first one and the best one. Scripting, my weakest point. Like I'm not a good scripter. I'm still learning. But it's really, really helpful as a level designer to know a very base level of scripting. Again, you don't need to make like crazy perfect mechanics, but if you can just make thing happen when button press, like that's a huge way of showing an idea that's actually playable. The fact that like someone could go into your level and like shoot something or press something and see something react, like that's a huge, like for game design, that's huge to like actually have a reactivity, interactivity. So I think that's really helpful. Sketching, I think is great. It's always helpful to have like some kind of like top-down map or like simple, like even stick person sketch of like the storyboard of what you want an action to be. Like supplementary things to the blockout is always really helpful to be like, so in this blockout, like this kind of thing will happen. You'll show like a sketch of like a person like picking someone up and hitting it with it or whatever. Like, so some level of sketching, and it doesn't have to be good. Like again, it doesn't have to be like artistic background. Like it can be stick figures, but just having, being able to communicate some idea with pen and paper is really helpful, not only for the team, but for yourself as well. References, not enough people do this. So if you have anyone who has an idea for a game or a level, like odds are it's probably been done before in a different way, maybe a different genre, a different game, a different level. And that's not a bad thing. Like that, it's a good thing because it means your idea probably works in some capacity. Right? You're just trying to like reskin it or make it a little bit different. But if you can find where it's been used and like take a GIF of it, take a video of it, whatever, and then come with that reference to the people that are like looking at it and be like, oh, like my idea is this epic chase scene, just like this level from Shadow of the Colossus, but instead for my game, you're riding a dolphin and like shooting a gun or whatever, right? Like you just start with a reference because you're making something like that. So you're showing someone that it works, but it's reskinned to suit whatever you're trying to build. So references are huge. I definitely recommend anyone that's trying to share ideas or a portfolio, whatever, gather references, find out where it's being done and where it's working. What makes a good level designer? Strategic design. This is what I mean. What I mean by this is being able to prioritize what's important. This is huge because level designers are supposed to be able to like pump out stuff pretty quick. Not to say that like there's a deadline that's like super short, but that like you want to get out something, anything within like a short time frame, test it, look at it, and then do it again. Like iteration is key with level design. You just want to do it. The more iteration you can do, the better the level is going to be. So the faster you can get at the first iteration, the faster you can get to a good level kind of thing. So being able to prioritize what's most important is a big part of that. This is really generally speaking, so not super transferable, but like in most situations, some really important aspects of level design is like comfortable movement. If you have any kind of movement, you want to be able to use it without bashing into walls and hitting your head and stuff. So that's one thing to test and iterate on. Smooth pacing, like again, you don't want like an hour of intense combat. Like you want 20 minutes of it and then a 10-minute exploration breather and then like a cutscene and then more, whatever. Like you want to break it up. And level design is a great place to get a feel for that. And then like the hook of the level. This is like, what's the thing that makes your level interesting? What's the thing that makes your game unique? Show it in some way in level design. It can be placeholder, it can be animation, it can be a sketch on the side, but you want to show it in some way. Things that are important is like what the final look of everything is. Like you don't need to know like what the architecture will be like or what the characters look like right away. Like you'll figure that out. What matters is the gameplay first. So you don't need to have like specific props. Lighting is a big thing to figure out. Don't worry about that. And like quality narrative and writing, like placeholder everything at first, and you're going to figure that stuff out later. again, generally speaking. Getting practice. This is something that I struggle with as well, is like, how do you actually get stuff made to practice this kind of thing? This is game design, level design, whatever. Obviously, make games is the way to get practice. But some misconceptions, I think, is like, you don't need to be making a new Hollow Knight, right? Like, you don't need to be making these like 2-person crazy projects. Like, especially when you're starting, quantity is way more important than quality. You can make just like a little like 10-minute experience based around a unique concept, and like, if you can polish it and get it playing like relatively well, make some levels for it, like that's great practice. Like, you don't need to make this crazy finished game. Keeping things simple is really, really important. I saw in like my courses at CIAT where some students were trying to make like a turn-based multiplayer XCOM like with stats and stuff, and they were putting all these variables in, and it's like, this is a like 4-week project, right? Like, no shot you can make that and for it to be like a high fidelity quality, right? So take like one interesting mechanic, like throw banana, do something, right? Like, how can you make that concept into like a game with 3 levels? Like, try that first. And then like, once you've done a few of those different genres, then you can go crazy and make something that's like a passion project. Speaking of passion projects, that's also really hard to do. Like, there are some unicorn people out there that are just able to spend all their free time on their like side projects. And like, I don't know how people do that. If you can, that's wonderful. But I can't just do that because I have like, I want to freaking play Elden Ring a bunch, right? Like, I don't want to work on my stupid side project. So what I've found helped a lot is like putting yourself in situations where you are pressured to finish something. So like, game jams are great. Like, game jams, if you enter them, like, you have people that are counting on you to finish something. You have a shortened time span. Like, you're probably not going to be happy with the results, but it forces you to make something, right? And that's a great starting place. School projects for the exact same reason. Like, all of my portfolio pieces are school projects because I was like in a situation working with people I liked working with. They were relying on me. We were in this like pressure chamber to finish something, and we did, and it was cool. Dungeons and Dragons. I think D&D, like dungeon mastering, is unironically like great game design practice. Like, you can just come up with anything you want if you know the rules, and then play test it at the table right there and get instant feedback. Like, you're like, oh, like I want to make this like frog monster that swallows people and they take damage every turn. Make that up like really quickly on paper, run a little one shot, try to see how it works. Maybe you kill everybody. Maybe it's super easy, whatever. But like, that's, you've made a little idea, you've tested it, and it's great. Obviously it's not as good as, you know, actual made games if you want a job, but I like so many of the jobs I've applied for. Actually, let me be clear. The 2 jobs that I've applied for and I've gotten, both of them were like, oh, you're a DM? That's really cool. Like, we value that. Like, it helps me get a job. So like, even if it's just like, you know, don't overthink it. Like, DMing is not as hard as people say. Give it a shot. I think it's great if you want to get into game design. This is something I've seen recently in people's portfolios. I've looked at a lot of people's portfolios who are getting jobs in industry, and they have level design studies, which is like the blockouts you saw before, the impressions, these like things. People will go into like God of War, Last of Us, and they'll recreate a level in the blockout and like throw in like a placeholder 3rd-person character they found in like an asset store just to walk around in it. And they'll just like do these deep dives on like what the level is doing and then create it themselves. I don't know if this is that good. I think it's not as good as like making an actual game, but the people I've seen doing these studies are getting jobs. So maybe like, I think it's useful if you're applying to a company and then you can do a study of that company's level, right? That's where it's useful. Where it's like, if you want to apply to Santa Monica, who made God of War, and then you do like a deep dive study of their level, they're gonna be like, oh man, like this person really cares, right? So I think that's the situation where it's like really helpful, where if you're applying somewhere, do a study of their level, put on your portfolio, and they'll show you really care. Not 100% sure though on that one. So we're gonna watch this really quick. This is a woman named Athena Corrington. I found her on LinkedIn because she just got a job at Insomniac. She's young, has a neat portfolio, has worked on one indie title before that, and before that it was all independent work, the stuff that you guys would be doing and that I did in school. And this was the trailer for her like personal like school game, just to show you like that you don't need to make an insane game to get hired, to get like initial position. I guess it's a music college because music's really good, but like pixel art, I think I read on her itch.io, it's like 3 levels, right? Like no more than 10, 20 minutes of gameplay. Some cute pixel art, I don't know if she made it or what, probably, looks pretty simple. couple of cutscenes. I don't know what it was made in. Could have been Game Maker, could have been Unity. Doesn't really matter what you make it in. Simple platform mechanic, I guess, like throw crystal to bird. I don't really know how it works, but like, again, so simple, right? Dodge drops, avoid spikes. Freaking beautiful soundtrack. That's the part that's not fair. Don't expect to make this soundtrack. But like I feel like you guys in game dev, like we could have made this for a course in SFU. Like this is like a simple game. One of like the two, it was a group project, and she managed to get a like entry-level indie position from this game, right? Like it's totally doable as long as you're sort of not overthinking it. One thing I will say is that it's important, I think, to have at least one finished looking game, at least one on your portfolio, where it's like that one, like that looked pretty finished. It had a little trailer, like it had like little cutscenes, it had a soundtrack. If you can put the extra effort into like market your thing in like a little bit of a nicer sheen, that's I think important for at least one, but it doesn't have to be all of them. Anyway, that leads into this part, preparing yourself. Your portfolio. This is the most important thing as a game designer, level designer, whatever. You need a space online where an employer can go and see what you've done. This can be, I have mine through Squarespace. I'll show you guys later. Wix is great. It can be like Itch.io too. It's nicer, I think, if you have like something that is only you personally, where it's just like, this is me and nothing else. But this is like where you need to show your projects. You need to show that you've worked on games, and you need to show your specific contributions to those games. The more you can break down like what your skill set is and like how you help this game be good, the better. Explaining your thought process, your goals, whatever. Like you can look at other portfolios and see like how the breakdowns are. But your portfolio is something that if you are looking to get into games, this is something you need. A good portfolio should have a finished game, like I said, at least one where it's like this flagship thing that like looks good, like on paper. Like someone can look at that and be like, ooh, a trailer, cool, it's got a little soundtrack, animations, whatever. Doesn't have to be huge. It can be a 3-level, 10-minute thing. But if you have at least one thing that has that little extra sheen to it, like that helps a lot for like to get eyes. A group project. If you have 10 solo projects, people will think that you're crazy or mean or whatever. So have at least one group project, but the more the better. Show that you're able to work in a team, because anyone that's hiring you is a team that wants you to work with them, right? So definitely show group projects. Evidence working with a game engine. Preferably Unity or Unreal. They're like the industry standards. But if you're really comfortable in like Game Maker because you like used it in like high school or something, that's totally fine. Like to make games, like people seeing that you've worked in engine are like, oh great, like this person knows how to work on a computer and we can teach them Unreal. Like I hadn't used Unreal before I got my position, but I was able to show that I had like the skills of a level designer. So they're like, great, like we'll teach you Unreal, come work for us. This is what's the time actually? Okay, cool. So we got like 25 minutes. Cool. I think we have time. Let's just look at some. I'm going to open some of these. God, one sec. So this is the woman that we went over earlier. She made that little Empower game. So if we go to her homepage, yeah, so a little intro, a picture of herself, like who she is, blah, blah, blah. These are her projects. All of them are playable. That's a big part of this. If you're a game designer or level designer, if your stuff can be played, that's so much better. It might not be, but the fact that it can just shows that you're thinking about gameplay, which is what matters most. So yeah, she has these 2 projects to the right, I think, that are just like her own, like maybe school projects, whatever. This was her, I think, indie project where she like got hired at a company. So again, like she made these 2 projects. These are like, I think, pretty simple. If we go into like the Empower one, like she describes what it is, a couple screenshots. What did she do? Like listed out specifically here. Some examples of sketches. So she did like level layouts. Again, like look how simple these are, right? Like you don't need to be a crazy artist or whatever to be able to come up with some ideas and then build them. So she's showing that she can do that ideation process. Looks like she did do the art, so cool, that's awesome. But again, like very, very simple game, and that looks finished, and the time was put in. So it's great to show that kind of thing for an employer. This is my friend Jules. They just got hired at the same company as me as a narrative designer. It's a little bit different, but again, like homepage, here are the different projects. This is a project that we worked on together actually. But yeah, a little game. Jules is like an incredible artist, so maybe not as fair to look at this kind of thing, but yeah, breakdown of like what is the game, What did Jules do? A lot of writing for this one. Again, narrative design was what they wanted, so this focuses more on writing. You can see each of them, like the writing work separately. Level design as well, like again, like very simple top-down 2D, just explaining your ideas, explaining like the pacing of stuff, breaking down like what they did for the different games. This person got hired at Naughty Dog. Same kind of process, I think, where like this, I think, is like a project they did, I think, for school. It won some awards. They did a great job. I don't know. Looks like this person might be one of those unicorns that just like is super good at everything. But she, again, like was able to just translate some like passion projects, some school projects into something in industry, and worked her way up to getting eventually like a really significant studio. Oh shit, sorry. This guy was an environment artist, I think, and he pivoted into level design. He's now working on God of War. But again, this person has a ton of projects, but all of them are really like bite-sized. Like if you go down all these, like there's a little board game he made, a little, I don't know what this is. But it looks like just like a bunch of little simple games, simple projects. And if you go into any of them, it shows like what the thing is, like his role, what he did, a little explanation with some screenshots. The more movement you show, the better. But I'm just trying to show that like they're not doing these like insane, like impossible to do things. This guy, I think, got a position on a Hitman, which is a huge game. And this person didn't have like an indie project before. They just had these like super detailed like blockouts where this is like not a game they made. It's just like a level design idea that they were able to create in a blockout form. They made this like little trailer for it. So again, like the work that went into this, I'm sure is huge amount. But again, like this was just something that they like spent a lot of time thinking about, learned how to do. It's not a completed game. It's a personal project, and it led to a like really good position. I'll show you guys mine really quick. So I have like this homepage. I have 6 projects. A couple of them are like professional. Some of them are, the other 4 are personal. But in each of them, I sort of go in like what I did, what the project was, and then I like break down like what I actually did that I think is useful for employers. Squarespace, which I use, I think is a nice. It's expensive. I'll warn you. It's like $20 a month or $10 a month or something. Like it's a little much, which is why Wixsite is a little bit better for this. But Squarespace is nice because it just like is instantly pretty. Like you have to put no work in to just like make it look nice. Like you just throw a bunch of images in and pick a font, and it's like, okay, here's a pretty website, and that's why I did it. Anyway, bottom line is that if you're applying to a job in game design, you can find people in the exact same position as you who are applying to jobs and getting them. You just need to know how to look for them. Literally go to LinkedIn, look up your dream company, or even not dream company, even a company that you're applying for, whatever. Look on LinkedIn, they have all the people that work on there, right? Like you can look up like junior designer for whatever XYZ company and then find their name. Usually they have their portfolio sometimes attached to their account themselves, or you can just Google them and then look at their portfolio like we just did with these ones. And you can be like, okay, what do I need to do to close the gap between me and this portfolio? That's what I did, right? Like I didn't have a portfolio, mine was kind of bad. So I collected like a bookmark of like 30 portfolios of people getting jobs that I wanted. And I was like, okay, what does this person have on theirs? How can I get closer to that? And then I slowly and surely like tried to close that gap as best I can, and it worked out. So I'm just saying that like the information is there, it's public. Level design test. This is like one of the last things I'll talk about. In any application for a level design job, you'll need to do some level of test. At larger companies, that test will be more intense. But even a smaller company will ask you to do some kind of like little exercise to show that you are able to sort of think about things a certain way. But one thing that I'll say is before you do the test, like I had to do one for Archiact that was a week long. That was like, I had a week to do it, whatever. I had like a due date and I had to like fulfill like a number of requirements, and I could do it in anything I wanted to do. I could do it in Unity, Unreal. I could probably like, if I could spin it in a certain way, I'm like, oh, this is like a big storyboard. Like I didn't actually build a game. It's just a bunch of sketches. Like I could have done that. They left it up to me, right? But again, if something's playable, it's always better. But being comfortable with at least one game making software to be ready to like create a level is helpful. Whether it be Game Maker, Unity, Unreal, even like PlayStation Dreams, which is like a game making PlayStation game. Like you can make freaking like cool games in that. Even Roblox. Roblox is like, Not as good just because it looks, you know, like how it looks. It's like kind of like Minecraft or whatever. It has the stigma attached to it, but you can make cool games in Roblox. Like it has the tools for you to do that. Anyway, this is this guy named Steve Lee. I'll link his stuff at the end. He has a YouTube channel. He fully posted his whole level design test that he did to get a job at Arcane that you can like look at and be like, okay, like what are the tests that other people are doing? It's pretty long, and we're a little bit short in time, so I won't go into it now. Yeah, it's out there. Some resources that I think if we send this presentation to people, like you can look at them yourself, but just really quick to go over them. There's tons of them online. Like if you just look, these are the ones that I value the most. Steve Lee Level Design YouTube channel. Again, he just shows you like clear examples of like what he did, and he breaks it down all for you. Like it's wonderful for level design. It's very helpful. Katie Cironis is a lead designer at Riot. She has a blog on her website that just like gives you a bunch of tips about like getting a job in like narrative or game design. And it like helps you prepare and stuff. Super helpful. She's wonderful. Game Maker's Toolkit is a YouTube channel. It's just these like really well edited videos that break down different game design principles. There's a bunch on level design, but there's a bunch on everything. I just highly recommend it to learn about games more if you're interested, if anyone's heard of it. So You Want to Make Games is a YouTube series by Riot focused on art, but I think it was like, I was very surprised at how much depth it had. Like it's a little peek into the AAA game industry. So recommend it for sure. It's a little bit like edited for children, like very like intense and wacky, whatever. But if you can get over that, it's great. This is I promise I'm not sponsored. I took this course called CGMA. Anya knew this because I presented about it. It's $1,000, which is not a lot for an online course. And it's taught by like mega professionals, like lead designer for The Last of Us, lead designer for Spider-Man for PS4. These people are like talking to you and like giving you direct feedback. Like it's just like a networking opportunity as well as like incredible learning opportunity. So I learned the most about level design from this course. So this is just me saying that like it is worth the money if you're in a position where you're able to spend that kind of money or get help with that kind of thing, whether it be a scholarship or what, not sure. Very helpful. Game Design Conference. You guys might have heard of it. In industry, when I was working at companies, if I like was stumped on like something, the first place I went was GDC on YouTube, where you look up talks. Like other designers have done talks breaking down how they did things. Try to find a talk that's relevant to what you're trying to do. So incredibly helpful. So many insights. So these are the main ones. There's more, but that's the big thing. I think with that, that's it. You can, anyone who's online listening or you guys here, whatever, feel free to ask me any questions at that email. Feel free to check out my portfolio for reference if you want. And thank you for listening overall.
The chat.
Cool.
Right. I think once it was during the presentation, and feel free to repeat this question because I don't know if they can hear it.
Cool.
From Amr, what's the difference between level design and environment art?
Cool. What's the difference between level design and environment art? Kind of going back to what I said earlier is, or what level design is it's focused around gameplay. The thing that matters the most in level design is gameplay. Like your space that you're building doesn't need to look nice. It needs to play nice. So again, if it's a platformer, like what are the distances between platforms that feel the best to land on? What are the heights that like, it shouldn't be like, you shouldn't be able to just reach into the platform. It should be somewhere in the middle. Like it's about testing for the gameplay, whatever it is, and building space around that. Environment art is just making things pretty. Like that's kind of what it is like, you have like, usually environment artists will get a block out like I've shown you. They'll be given like this blocky, gross, ugly, like cubic environment. And it's their job to replace all those cubes with beautiful artwork. So environment artists were like, they'll build those trees and place those trees in and build the buildings and everything. So yeah, it's gameplay versus just I make game look good kind of thing. Yeah.
No.
Okay. I have a question. Just what does a typical day look like for you when you're working?
Cool. What does a typical day look like for me when I'm working? Typical day is wake up at 9. I try to wake up at 8:30. Usually it's 9. Spend about an hour just getting familiar with like where I left the previous day. It's like opening up the software, looking at my notes, looking at like what my current task is. So like right now at work today, my current task was reducing the size of one of the rooms I had made because it was like out of scope to build it that big. So I was like, okay, how do I reduce the size, bring the walls in, move stuff around? So that was a task I like got myself more familiar with. There's like a morning meeting called a stand-up usually, where you and the other people that you work with in your department are like, hey, I'm doing this today and I did this yesterday. And then the next person is the same thing. This is so like, if anyone has work that like relies on you, you like are reminded of it then. And then the full day is me just like working on that task. I had a few meetings to like review some stuff I had made or review stuff other people had made. And then like once you finish that task, usually there's like a review meeting that's like scheduled in the week somewhere, and you should have something done before then. And then you get it reviewed, you get feedback, you iterate on the feedback, or you move on to something new. So yeah, it's me in Unreal, moving blocks, playtesting stuff, that kind of thing. Generally, just not to scare anybody, the deadlines, these review meetings I'm talking about, they're soft deadlines. It is totally okay and should be totally okay at most companies to be like, I need more time with this, please, right? And obviously you don't want to do that forever, but it's okay to be like, I didn't get this done, I'm sorry, whatever, right? Like that's, game companies aren't going to fire you for not doing that stuff, so yeah.
Do you have any like suggestions or advice for people who start working on a level, scrap it, make a new one, scrap it, make a new one, scrap it? I'd like to fail forward better when making stuff, and was curious if you had any advice on that.
Advice for people that have worked on levels and scrap it instead of like working on top of it kind of thing?
Yeah, exactly. Like
cool.
Continuing on an idea.
Yeah. I mean, if you make a level and you test it and it's so bad that you think it's not worth changing or trying to fix, then I think it's helpful to like ask yourself like why that might be. It could, like if it's something to do with like the mechanics, like not like needing more work, that might be part of it. Because like the thing is like, I actually didn't mention this, and maybe I should have, is the space that you make for the gameplay usually requires the gameplay to also be good, right? So I'm not saying your gameplay is bad by any means or whatever, but like the gameplay should be fun in itself, and then the space should support that fun gameplay. If the gameplay is just like not fun, that's also like a, you know, it's hard to make a level feel good for gameplay that might have problems. So maybe it's more to like go back to like the mechanic tweaking. Like, can you make the jumping feel better? Can you make the attacks feel better? If you can go and like iterate on those and like get those feeling in a little sort of chamber, feeling good, then go back to a level and see like if you can make something that feels good. Maybe that could be it. But other than, if not that, if you feel confident in your gameplay and you keep scrapping it, I would say start with direct reference. Can you find a game that's like super similar to yours and like copy one of their levels for the sake of an exercise, right? Like you don't need to plagiarize, but like build something that's the same and then be like, okay, like what's working with this? How can I use that as a starting point for my next one, right? So those I think maybe are two things to think about.
Yeah, that seems like a great idea. I'm gonna rip off a level from a game I like.
You should be definitely willing to rip off stuff, because literally like Fallen Jedi is just like a bunch of mechanics from other games pushed into one, or Fallen Order. And Cyberpunk is just a million game mechanics shoved into one. So like everyone's doing it. You just need to change it enough to make it your own. Yeah, I think that's like, again, just don't copy, just use it as reference. These like, if you have a game and like these designers spend years and hours like figuring out why this would work, like just yoink that and be like, cool, like you did this work for me, and I'm going to change it to make it work for my thing, right? Like, don't ignore the work that other people have done. And again, like I'm being, you know, facetious here, but like it's about like clever use of reference. Don't plagiarize, but like use the things they've learned for your benefit, right? Don't reinvent the wheel, that whole thing. Yeah. Fine.
Yes, it's also a question from the chat, kind of two parts.
Cool.
Also from Ahmed. So what kinds of opportunities can a level designer have if they have level design skills and environment art skills? And as well, are there any volunteering or part-time jobs available in the summer for students to gain experience?
Sorry, can you say the last part of that again?
Yes, are there any volunteering or part-time jobs available in the summer for students to gain experience?
Any volunteering or part-time jobs? Cool. First one, which was how can an environment artist, like how do the skills cross over between environment art and level design?
Yeah, so what kinds of opportunities can a level
Opportunities.
designer have if they have those two skills?
Cool. I mean, if you looked at the portfolios I showed you, the guy named K-Tool, he was an environment artist before he got hired at Santa Monica, right? So environment art is like super beneficial because you're working with space. That's like a huge part of it. Like to be an environment artist, you need to understand space pretty well. And again, that is, I think, one of the most important skills of level designer is understanding space. It's again, just like reorienting it to focus more on the space for gameplay and less on it for the looks. So like something that I can do because of my art background, and I'm not sure if you have an environment art background, but like because of your art background, you're able to picture what the spaces will look like pretty clearly because you have that like reference. It's just about like reimagining it with gameplay as a focus. So yeah, definitely transferable. I think like you could I've seen a lot of people that have transitioned to level design from environment art. It's just about, again, like changing, like marketing yourself in that way, changing it from like, hey, I care more. I don't care as much about like the beautiful environments and more about like, now I can make environments that support gameplay that also happen to be beautiful because I have that skill set. A volunteering and job experience in the summer. I don't know anything off the top. I know that co-op is sometimes really great. Anya got, I think, 2 co-ops in games. My first edition was a co-op in games. So SFU has like a pretty good co-op program. Like it's worth looking into if you want to. I don't know about volunteering, especially for games. I think like that would kind of be where I would say like game jams, that kind of stuff. Like find out what people are doing. There's tons of online game jams, like big ones. There's one called Ludum Dare, which is coming up, I think, in a couple of weeks. There's like the Brackies one, there's a GMTK one, whatever. So if you want like experience in games, then I would say like, yeah, game jams, school projects, or just apply to like internships and, big one, actually, sorry. QA. QA is a very common gateway into the industry. It doesn't require a huge amount of experience, but getting into QA at like any big company, and what QA is quality assurance, which is like testing. So people always need playtesters. So I think you can apply to EA as a playtester or like anywhere you can find QA stuff. You don't need a lot of experience. Some companies take advantage of you. Like some companies will like kind of drag you around and be like, oh, come do QA for us and maybe we'll give you a job someday. And then they don't, right? Like companies some companies suck and will do that. But I've seen a lot of people that have started in QA and like got a job out of it. So that's another gateway to look into, maybe.
Okay, I have one question.
Yeah.
You mentioned the kind of connection between level designing and then environment design.
Mm-hmm.
And kind of the path of how you make these blockouts and give them to the designers, the like art environment designers, make them look pretty. What's on the other side? Like, what's your communication with people who are like actually building mechanics or designing or doing the programming? Totally.
So the question is, what is the relationship between level designers and the like engineers, the programmers and stuff, the other side of things? Great question. I honestly wish there was more communication at my company between us and the programmers. From how it works at my company, and again, I think this changes pretty heavily, is the programmers and engineers will kind of like create the mechanics in these like isolated spaces. Where like they'll go into like a level that's just like empty except for like just like an empty room essentially, and they'll build like a very particular mechanic. Like I'm going to just build shooting in this empty room, or I'm going to build opening a door in this empty room, or like picking up an object, and then they like iterate on those mechanics, make sure it's bug free. They use the same like character controller, whatever, and then they'll like be like, okay, this mechanic is done. Here you go, level designers, put it in level. And we'll be like, oh, okay, cool. And then like, we'll put in all the doors and all of a sudden they work well. That's how it is at my company. I don't know. I think it changes pretty heavily, but I think not as much communication from level designer to engineering. It's mostly, I think, project leads being like, here's how the game will work. go build it, give it to level designers, they build the space, and then art comes in and fills that space with pretty things. I think that's how it's been here. I kind of wish there was more back and forth between level designers and engineers, because sometimes mechanics don't work as they would expect at like a high level thinking on paper. But yeah.
I'll add on to that question with how much kind of like mechanics do you end up designing, like as a level designer?
Yeah. So I think how much mechanics do I end up designing as a level designer? I'm surprised by the amount I'm able to pitch. So this also, again, changes heavily from company to company. A game like Valorant, you wouldn't have much creativity because it's just like so important to be balanced and like the mechanics are so set in stone. But a game that's like an RPG where like you have like a cool idea, like level designers, I think, and this is why level design, another reason it's cool, is because you're like, oh man, like this like swamp area that I'm building is so cool. What if we had these like big bugs that would explode if you shot them, right? Like a big mosquito. Like if you had that idea, you might have to spend a little bit of your own time like pitching it, like getting together some reference and like sketching and stuff. But you can, like, at least at my company, I'm fully able to go to like my lead and be like, hey, I had this cool idea. Here's what it could look like. What do you think? And like I've had times already in my like 2 months being here where they're like, that's really cool. Like let's maybe like do a quick prototype with some simple scripting, show it to the leads and see if it's worth putting in. So I think at a lot of companies where it's like more of a creative, you can take creative liberties. You can fully come up with like, hey, this space that I'm working on, like, I think this would really fit here. Can we do it? And again, it's about, like I said, proving your idea. If you have that idea, spend a little bit extra time to get the reference. If you can script, do a little prototype on your own time, right? Show it to somebody, and then maybe you can get it in, which is cool. Yeah.
I have a question. As like a level designer, like I guess what % do you care about the environment design / art side? Like, is it like they can just figure it all out, or do you give some thought to how it would end up looking?
Yeah. So how much thought does a level designer put into how something will look on the art side of things was the question. I'll say it again, sorry to be a broken record, but it does depend on the company. But again, let's pretend that we're at like something with more creativity. There's always a balance to strike. At my company, like say for example that you're building like in a level this big like courtyard, right? And at the center of the courtyard, you're like, oh, it'd be great if we could have some statue here. That's really cool. As a level designer, you could put in a big cube and be like, cool, it's going to be a statue. Who knows what it'll look like? It's up to the environment artist to figure out. But if you have this picture in your head of like, oh man, like I have an idea for the centerpiece that like fits with the lore of the game, and like is this hero that I read about because I care about our game. Like you can, there's nothing stopping you from putting that in as a placeholder, as long as it's not too much work, right? Like you don't want to spend like 2 hours modeling it, right? But if you throw in like a placeholder mannequin and like pose it a certain way, spend like 20 minutes, whatever, and be like as part of the pitch for the level, be like, I had this idea because it makes sense. The artist might be like, that's awesome. Like, we love that. Let's do it. Or they might be like, oh, sorry, we had planned for this. No, right? You could try it. Like, no harm done on your part. Same amount of time. But if you do get it in, it's like, oh, cool. Like, I got to make a choice, right? Like, so, like, there's nothing stopping you from just like putting in a placeholder if you have a cool idea. But just be ready to be shut down is what I'm saying, because it's not exactly your, choice. Yeah.
There's a chat. So we got a question from Nicole. When designing, what would be a good balance between variation in design to keep things interesting, but also repetition to make the gameplay familiar and understandable? Can too much variance or repetition sacrifice quality and enjoyment?
Can too much variance or repetition sacrifice quality and enjoyment in level when it comes to mechanics? Super, super good question. I just watched a documentary by a YouTube channel called NoClip. Big recommendation, by the way. They do video game documentaries on this game called Black Mesa, which is a remake of Half-Life 1. And the designers literally said that they had this mechanic they loved, and they, while working on it, pushed it way too far and had the player using this mechanic that they loved so many times that it became fatiguing. And that's the key word, is like fatigue versus confusion. If you have so much variance and mechanics changing constantly, then it'll probably confuse the player because they'll like forget how something works or misunderstand something. But if you repeat the same mechanic over and over again. It has to not be fatiguing. The answer to that question comes down to playtesting. That is the answer for you. You don't need to come up with a solution because playtesting will tell you the answer. You can like come up with what you think will be good, use reference, like look at examples, be like, okay, like I have this great like jumping mechanic that I'm going to use here, like, and it introduces it slowly, and then you do this like super bounce up to this area, and then you do like a little bit of combat, and then there's like more super bouncing, and then you do combat while super bouncing, whatever. Again, just spitballing here. You make it as best you can, you use your judgment, and then you test it. And if, you know, all 10 of your playtesters are like, oh man, like I hate jumping, I'm sick, right? Like then maybe you have less jumping. Or if people are like, how the hell does this jumping thing work again? Like I came across this, I remember this like weird pad from like 10 minutes ago. I don't know what it does. I don't want to touch it. And it's like, yeah, maybe you should have done it more. So like, again, use your judgment, use your intuition as a game designer. That's why you're here. Test it, and then that's where you'll get the answers. Yep.
Got the question from myself.
Cool.
So I know like a lot of people say like the level design is like, oh, super awesome job, you get to work in games. But I wonder if you ever have like bad days at work and how does it look like?
Do I ever have bad days at work, even though I like my job and I'm a level designer and stuff? So I think I've been at this company such a short time that I've like pretty much enjoyed all of it. I think that bad days at work, I don't know, like I think for the most part in my experience, bad days at work have nothing to do with your position. There's like other factors for me at least, where it's like people or, you know, time management or other factors, whatever. But like, I would say, I think my answer to this has to do with just like being a creative. You do need to have somewhat thick skin. And I don't mean this in like a toxic way where it's like put up with toxic behavior. Do not put up toxic behavior in the workplace, but you need to understand how to take criticism for sure, especially in level design where your stuff will be iterated on so many times. But any creative, you're going to have ideas, you're going to show them to people. And when there's a big company with millions of dollars in the line, they're going to be honest with what they think of it. And then if you're lucky, not if you're lucky, if ideally you'll have people that are able to communicate those criticisms in a, you know, respectful way. But like it sucks to have something you put a lot of work into or you care about a lot, and to have someone be like, this won't work, we got to scrap it, right? That sucks. Especially the more work you put in, the more it sucks. I don't know what everyone's experience is like when getting feedback. I thank my schooling for this a lot, but like get good at receiving feedback, get good at not taking things personally, trust that the people you're working with want the best for the project, and that's why they're showing their concerns for what you've done. And then try again, and eventually you'll get it. So yeah, cool. Any other questions?
Nothing in the chat. You can encourage them to ask questions again.
Yeah. Any other questions in the chat? If not, that's all good. Cool.
Yeah,
I guess that's it.
Right. Well, thank you, Quinn.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much for coming.